All right, good evening and welcome to the channel. I'm Brian Lusk. Thanks for joining me today. We're going into our Ukraine update about now. I think got everything set up, and so the stream should be good to go. I shouldn't have to go back and reintroduce. Give it a minute for things to kind of settle down. If anybody wants to jump in a hurry here, that'd be great. If not, that'll be fine too, because we're just going to go through some things from the Russo-Ukraine war for the last 2 days or so. It's been busy around my house, and so I've been trying to keep caught up on things. And this is just my first opportunity to jump right back in and get an update on the Ukraine war. So on that note, I'm going to start off with the biggest news of the day here. Let's go ahead and switch over here. Pop this up a size. Apparently, there has been an attack by the Ukrainians on Kerch. Not the bridge, though. This is the naval port, the naval facility there. You can see this very short video right here of the video at the time. Now, when I initially started researching this, they had not confirmed this was an actual attack, but in the meantime, they've confirmed that since. The Ukraine did conduct a missile strike on the Kerch shipyard in occupied Crimea. It's next to the Crimean bridge that connects to the peninsula, basically, and the strike did take place during the daytime, so there's no reason that Russia shouldn't have been able to see it coming, for lack of a better way to say it. Brain just went pause for a moment there. Anyway, there's a bunch of Russian military vessels there. This port has not been struck before. And I wonder if they thought it was mainly under the same protection as that of the Kerch Bridge itself. They've ended up with potentially the loss of a vessel. Let's go ahead and continue on. More reports. This one says at least two missiles were seen. And some of them were reported to be of the Tu-141 type. I think I've got a picture in here somewhere of what that looks like. Hang on. Nope, don't have it handy. But the Ukrainians finally confirmed that they had launched a successful attack and struck the shipyard in Kerch. They also potentially hit a Karakurt-class corvette, the Askold, and that's what this ship looks like right here. The rumors we're seeing is that 3 missiles potentially struck that ship. Now, it was reported to be under repair or in dry dock. We're not sure which one at the time. So, and I've seen various levels of reports on this stating anything from destroyed to heavily damaged to, minor damage. So we don't have a good report on what the damage to this ship was or to the port itself just yet, but we do have that confirmed attack by Ukrainian forces on the Kerch port, the Kerch naval yard. Now, this is another one of the ones that says that this is a Ukrainian source stating that they believe it was the destruction of this small ship. This is one of the Caliber cruise missile carriers, and that goes out into the Black Sea and then launches missiles at Ukraine. So the destruction of this is very good for Ukraine. It's less of those precision missiles that Russia can put out in any one attack. Sorry about that. I think I hit the mute button for a little too long. We don't have good information on it just yet, but the report is still that this one ship in particular was potentially hit by 3 missiles, and it's only stated that it's in the shipyard, not that it was necessarily in dry dock. So that's the situation over in Kerch. Let's go and move on to some news around Ukraine. Ukraine has received these U.S.-made M1150 assault breacher vehicles. It's basically an Abrams tank with a different turret that's entirely for basically breaching minefields and the like. This thing's a beefy-looking critter. I can't get a good view of it for here, so We'll go back to this. It's got a weird looking front end there, and I believe these are the mine clearing line charge launchers here potentially. I'm not sure. The 1150 is not one I'm very familiar with, but it's just interesting to see it being deployed to Ukraine. Been a lot of yelling on the old interwebs here about the replacement of Special Operations Forces Commander Viktor Korenko. Now, he's the Mr. General Korenko said he found out about his replacement from seeing reports on the media. But Zelensky is saying that it was requested by Defense Minister Rustem Umerov to replace him. So just know that there's a bit of a shakeup in the leadership over there as things are going along. There's also been a lot of rumor mill material, and I've probably hit it somewhere else along here, that Ukraine is getting pressured by Western governments to come to the negotiating table, and what would it take to get them to make peace with Russia. This so far has been denied by about every other involved person. This is Dmytro Kuleba here. Ukraine is not engaged in any so-called secret negotiations with Russia. The primary conditions for negotiations is the withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukraine's territory. That simple. The Russian troops leave, they can actually have a negotiation at that point about the actual disposition of the final of their peace, or at least their ceasefire. Kyiv received 3 Renault fire trucks with 4x4 wheels from the city of Leipzig. This is great. They've been having to deal with missing equipment for a while now in Kyiv and a bunch of other places. So sending this new fire gear will help them to fight the fires that are being caused by the missiles that are being launched at them daily. After Zaluzny, that would be General Zaluzny's interview / article, there's been a lot of talk about this being a stalemate. And Zaluzny did kind of indicate that there is some stalemate going on, though he said specifically that it was going into positional warfare rather than the high-speed warfare that people had been hoping for. So the stalemate talking point mainly is coming from the Russian side. The Ukrainians have denied it. The Russians have even denied it, but it's the Russian propagandists that are putting this out there. However, President Zelensky has said it's not a stalemate situation. We have been in a more complicated situation. We were in a more difficult situation in which apparently Ukraine had never been since the restoration of independence. But we really believed and fought and won. Today, the time has passed. People are tired. Everyone is tired, and there are different opinions. But this is not a stalemate situation. And if you start looking at it from an objective standpoint, that's not just lines on the map. If you look at it from the perspective of where is the Black Sea Fleet? Well, it's mostly hiding in Novorossiysk and other ports that are farther away, no longer in their headquarters at Sevastopol. Where is what happened to the helicopters that were in Berdyansk and Luhansk? Well, they're no longer in those locations. They've been moved on to Russian territory proper, which is forbidden, effectively, that the U.S. has said that the Ukrainians can't use their ordnance to attack those positions. I'll have more on that later. What's the situation in Kherson? That was a static line. It's no longer static. Things are moving over there across the Dnieper River. There has been advances. Now, obviously, we all hoped for, the Western world all hoped for, a speedy lightning attack that would get, tremendously destroy the Russian lines, and they'd get through and they'd be able to cut things off and have this huge propaganda victory as well as a military victory. That's not occurred. But even so, it's not a stalemate in the sense of there are things getting done. Russia has been throwing everything they can at Ukraine, trying to open a hole anywhere in their defensive lines. And I'll be talking about that later as well. They're making small amounts of progress. So again, not a stalemate, but there's a lot that needs to be done. Archer artillery systems have arrived in Ukraine. As of my understanding, is there are 8 of them in Ukraine now. And they've talked about the elections a few times, and it looks like they're getting serious about potentially holding elections in spring of 2024. The bulk of Ukraine is relatively stable at this point. Yes, it's under attack consistently. The problem is going to be those areas where they won't be able to reach, the areas that are under Russian control or right on the front lines where these people have been displaced. But even so, they could potentially hold them. That's up to Ukraine. Ukrainian instructors conducted a tactical medicine training course for NATO troops. They have got the most current experience in battlefield medical response, and therefore they set up a training class, this time for the Estonian Armed Forces, to provide that experience and as training, so that they'll be able to be prepared for their own potential battles in the future. Interesting that they're using this opportunity to get that information and get that training out to NATO as a whole, not just letting it sit over in Ukraine where it's happening now. Ukraine has a domestically produced missile system called the Krim-2, or Thunder, apparently, and they report they have managed to upgrade it from its about 300-kilometer range to a 700-kilometer range. Now it's domestically produced, so therefore it's not under any of the restrictions that other Western weapons have been placed under. And the question is, what are they going to hit? Can they do it successfully? And how hard will it be to be intercepted? If it's hard to be intercepted, like a HIMARS or something like that, then there's a lot of possibilities open right up. But if it's just a long-range system that can't maneuver or can't move out of the way of intercepting equipment, it will have minimal impact at that range, except for to bring more areas under just general threat. And President Zelensky also commented on the rumors that the U.S. and the EU were pressuring Ukraine to negotiate. And he says, "I don't know where this comes from and who writes it. Everyone knows my attitude, the opinion of Ukrainian society on this. We have repeatedly heard that at Ramstein we are allegedly being persuaded towards something. But this is not the case and will not happen," he said. And that is through Ukraine news. I'm going to take a brief pause here. If anyone would like to comment or say anything, thank you for joining me today, and I always appreciate having you here. This will give me a moment to just kind of breathe and let the voice relax for a moment before I move on to the Russian news. All right, that's good there. Let's go ahead and flip back over and get this up here. Going through the items about Russia. Peskov has claimed that reports about possible Russian weapons transfers to Hezbollah are groundless. And he puts that into this perspective of, we've already said that this group Wagner doesn't exist. So all these speculations about Wagner fighters conducting these weapons into Hezbollah can't happen because the organization doesn't exist. It's a flat out lie. Wagner exists. It's a thing. Saying it doesn't exist doesn't make it so. So it's an absurd thing for them to lie about this. Why are they lying about something that is so obviously and provably false? It just doesn't make sense. It destroys any credibility they had left. Vladimir Putin did a little bit of victim blaming. He said that Ukraine being unfriendly to Russia forced Russia to take Crimea, and therefore forced Russia into doing all the further actions like Donetsk and Luhansk. So this is just basically saying, you're mean, so I'm going to beat you up and take away your lunch money. Doesn't make sense. And on this one, I want to just address this for a moment. This is a propagandist talking about the special military operation restoring the greatness of the Russian Empire. Making wars sacred is a specialty of Russia. For faith, Tsar, and fatherland is a popular slogan of Russian soldiers from the 19th century. And here's the thing. We're already seeing what religious wars look like in Israel and with the Israel-Hamas situation right now. The whole situation in the Middle East. And until now, I've not put the situation in Ukraine into a religious war perspective. It's not in the classic sense, until you think about it slightly differently. For Russia, and particularly for Vladimir Putin, their religion is power. That is what the religious cause they're after here. If they truly had, they've effectively made power into their religion. That power over people, that power over nations, and that whole desire to wage war is all for power, which has become their religion in effect. So if you think about the attack on Ukraine in the sense of this is a religious war, some things start to fall into place. I just kind of want to put that out there as a thought process that we can talk about in future times. There has been a reduction in the amount of information getting out about Ukraine into the Western press. I've noticed that when I've been trying to research on things myself. And the Russian propagandists even are talking about Ukraine less. They're talking about Hamas and Israel. And they're crowing that the Israel situation has divided the West and distracted from Ukraine, and therefore helps Vladimir Putin. Russia's conducted a couple of tests of their nuclear weapons carriers, their missiles, and both of them have been, well, ineffective. They've been defective. One of them flew off course immediately. In fact, I believe both of them did. And it was very much unreliable. And that puts to question the condition of Russia's overall nuclear capabilities at this point in time. Interesting little bit here. Let me go ahead and put this back to the beginning. Vladimir Putin, according to this, had a little visit with some kids. And one of the kids said, "Are you Putin?" "For now, I am." They claim he doesn't use body doubles either, but that sure sounds like something a body double would say, and not somebody who really is Vladimir Putin. An S-300 radar was hit and destroyed. One of the reasons I bring this up every once in a while is because the radars have all the components that are hard for Russia to produce or replace. So if a radar is destroyed, it takes out an entire air defense sector until they can get a new radar in there. And the more that are destroyed, the harder it'll be for Russia to maintain that radar coverage. If you're in prison, of course, we've already talked about prisoners being basically encouraged to join the military organizations with money and promises of freedom and things like that. Well, now they're making it more of a draft situation where they're registering these prison inmates without the requirements for an in-person appearance or medical or psychological evaluation. This is a way of getting those that weren't tempted by the money the first time, and they're still capable of being soldiers on the front in the prisons right now. That's all it is. One of the issues with sanctions is that the people in Russia need to feel them for them to have effect. Unfortunately, it seems like the Russians are, by and large, able to continue their lives with some changes. In this case, it's tickets to the Nutcracker Ballet, which they stood in line for up to 12 hours to get. Russia's also blocking websites that fundraise for Ukraine. It's just basically controlling the information space, as it says right here. And the TASS news agency, 10 days after the Wagner attempt to overthrow the government, for lack of a better way to say it, the director of TASS, the state-run news agency, was replaced. And that was the first known punishment of a senior civilian functionary in connection with the rebellion. They're continuing to look for those who are not loyal to the country and remove them from their positions. All right, that's the end of the Russia section here. Let me go ahead and flip this back over here. I'll take a brief pause. If you're here, go ahead and sound off. Say something in the comments. I'll be watching for your questions or comments. So glad to have you here if you've joined me so far. Thank you very much. Let's go ahead and move on to the international news around the Ukraine war. Frontlines comes up after this. The Netherlands is preparing a 500 million euro military aid package for Ukraine, according to their defense minister. And these deliveries are expected by mid-2024. That'll be artillery shells and tank ammunition. That's $260 million for that. Yeah, it's just split between those two. Tank shells, artillery shells. This is vital for Ukraine to be able to continue to carry out the war. South Korea was continuing to supply some machine tools to Russia, but they've now these have been sanctioned and now will be blocked, actively blocked instead. So South Korea will no longer be able to provide those to Russia. Rheinmetall has been working on setting up a new plant in Ukraine, probably plants. And so they're still in discussions to get that cooperation going. A lot of interesting things about producing military weapons on Ukraine's own territory. Okay, I've already talked about this earlier, so I'm going to move on. Oh, no, I am not going to move on. About the situation with the supposed U.S. and EU trying to convince Ukraine to come to the negotiating table at this point in time. There's a few comments that have been made about that. If that is true, it will be essentially recognizing that tyranny has defeated democracy all over the world. We all know that if there's a truce of any kind, it's just going to be a chance for Russia to build up some more weapon stockpiles and come back for another bite, because they will have successfully gained legitimacy for this attack. It will also basically open up the door for other dictators in the world to begin making their own attacks, knowing that the U.S. has effectively been, and the EU have effectively been rendered toothless, unable to respond, that they've basically thrown in the towel. Or as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania said, children will curse us in the trenches that we dig for them. We are dangerously close to missing an opportunity to end the Kremlin's centuries of imperial aggression and secure the future of several continents. So that's the situation right there with the talks about peace talks, which again appears to be mostly Russian disinformation. A group of, in fact, this is from the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, have called for additional long-range ATACMS missiles to be sent. They say that there's already a hot production line to backfill them. All it has to be done is turned on with a contract. And they state this as a deep strike capability. And I wonder if the idea is that with those missiles, the Americans could take the gloves off, stating that military targets on Russian terrain are valid targets as well for U.S.-made munitions of this type. If so, it's just the phrasing kind of leads me that direction. Same information there. Interesting fact. After seeing how effective U.S. military equipment is in Ukraine, even in small numbers, European countries have placed $90 billion worth of orders for American military hardware. That's including nearly 500 HIMARS launchers for Poland alone, along with 10,000 missiles to go with it. So, as much as I hate to say it, because the economic is not not how I look at the war. I don't. That is, we have an obligation, not that is non-economic. But for those who think the dollars and cents are the things that make the difference, here's your deal. Our hardware is kicking Russian butt, even in small numbers. And every time it does, more orders roll in for our hardware, not for Russian hardware. New aid package from the Department of Defense with additional NASAMS, additional HIMARS, 155 millimeter and 105 millimeter artillery rounds, TOW missiles, Javelin, and the AT-4 anti-tank systems, 3 million rounds of small arms ammunition and grenades, claymores, demolition munitions, 12 trucks, cold weather gear, spare parts, maintenance, and other field equipment. That's going to really help out, especially right now, right before the weather turns really cold. I've already seen indications in some of the video I'm seeing that there is either intense frost or light snow in certain areas of the front. And if that's the case, it means that we're already at that point in Ukraine. A commentary from the Wall Street Journal. The reason the CIA Director William Burns and the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan have been wrong so often is because they still fail to realize that we are at war. A single war against dictatorships and terrorists. That's according to Gary Kasparov. Okay, we're going to go into the front lines in just a moment here. And again, I am watching for questions or comments, so please sound off if you're here. I'll go ahead and get ready for the next part here. All right. While specific changes to the front lines are not exactly common, there are a couple of little changes that have come in the last day or so. I'm going to quickly review those, then review all of the front lines. Let's see, that would be right here. First up is west of Staromayorsk. The Russians seem to have managed to progress along this tree line right here. No, not really significant, except for just that they're dedicating troops to making this movement. My estimate is that there's probably been light defenses in this area anyway, as one of the less common areas right now. Move back over here, and the other one was up here near Lyman Pershing. Let's go ahead and zoom out so you can kind of get a feel for that. Let's go ahead and get in here again. All right, so here is the day before yesterday's lines. Here's today's lines. Again, this is mostly wide open territory, likely lightly defended, and likely lightly attacked for that matter. That's from the information I'm seeing. There's not a lot of stuff here. The Russians are just taking advantage of the opportunities they can. So overall, here's the situation. Let's see. Is it on? It is on. Okay. From the bad news section here, by and large, Russia has been the one taking the initiative right now. There's been indications of light amounts of attacks in this area along here. No real changes along as we go farther south. Not in the last while, so no changes there. No changes near Bakhmut, which is kind of unusual. Andriivka and Klishchiivka have continued to be hot points on the fronts, but no changes to the lines that have been reported yet. Avdiivka, of course, is the really hot spot right now, and still is. I'll get into some of the details on it in a little bit, but the Russians are reporting that they have managed to start making some progress on the other side of the front of the railroad tracks in this area. Again, everything I'm seeing indicates that this area right here, even though it's showing as Russian, held is Russian held in name only. They can run up there, they can throw a few rounds up, but they're not able to stand in those positions or hold them directly. They're under fire immediately as soon as they do. No major changes over here or throughout the main parts of the southern section. Still fighting in this area near Robotna and Verbova. No changes to the front lines I've seen in the last couple of days. And of course, the other interesting area is if we go over here to the Dnipro River. And this is where things are starting to get interesting, especially. Now, we already know, let's get in a little bit closer here. Okay, there we go. We already know about the situation around Krinky, where the Ukrainians currently hold part of the center of Krinky right here. They are also working on advancing towards Poima here and Podstepna here. And this section right here is extremely dynamic with the Russians trying to counter and a lot of fighting going on. So that section right there. The Russians are also trying to get to push in near Krinky, but have not been successfully able to so far. And therefore, the whole situation remains darn fluid, but the Ukrainians have the upper hand in this section. There's also a report that I caught just today that there was another indication of Ukrainian forces going back to Kozachi Laheri right here. They're effectively assaulting across multiple places across the Dnipro River. Of course, there's still the existing foothold right here near Oleshki that's continuing. This whole area has got Ukrainian presence all throughout. But overall, we're looking at a situation where Ukraine has the initiative here and is making additional efforts to keep it. And that's the situation on the front lines. Let's go ahead and move over to some of the other details. The Defense Intelligence Update talks about the overall trend of the battle right now, of the war. Specifically, that if all other factors are equal, the balance of land combat generally favors the defending force. So in the south, Ukrainian advance remains relatively static over near Verbova. And around Avdiivka, it remains static there as well because the Russians are defending near Verbova and the Ukrainians are defending near Avdiivka. No major changes because the defender has the advantage. They also mentioned that the front lines are enormous, 1,200 kilometers worth of line of contact. So they can't focus their troops too much. They have to have enough troops to cover the entire line, at least to a certain extent, in responsive teams or whatever they have to do. But they can't take those teams off of an area over there and put them down here or over here or anywhere else because they have to be able to hold all 1,200 kilometers of those front lines. A little talk about the situation around Avdiivka. The Defense Intelligence Update of the UK states that the Russians have lost around 200 armored vehicles during their assaults, and they're expecting to do another round of assaults soon. Overall, it just proves that the Russians are willing to take tremendous losses for marginal territorial gains. The Russians are preparing to seize the Avdiivka coke plant, which is the area that we were just discussing, right across that rail line. And so we're expecting a lot of battle to be happening around this plant for the next while. If they do successfully take the Avdiivka coke plant, that's going to be really bad news for the defenders in Avdiivka proper. It will effectively begin cutting them off from resupply, and it will make it so they're having to deal with enemy in their rear as well as to their front. So this would be a third wave, which by my count would be about a fifth wave. And even so, they've been pouring men and hardware in here for marginal gains, the Russians have. So we're going to be watching this area closely. Ukraine control map reports heavy fighting northeast of Kharkiv and Avdiivka. In northeast Kharkiv, sorry. Russian forces have claimed to have crossed this railroad, but again, I've not seen any proof of that. No video proof, nothing. An analysis of the visible losses of the Russians and the Ukrainians throughout the Avdiivka offensive. 209 Russian armored vehicles versus 14 Ukrainian. I mentioned this in the last video. It was just kind of breaking news right then that the Russians tried to do a big assault near Volodar. They lost a tremendous amount of equipment there as well. Now, I believe that was that little tree line that they managed to capture, but I believe it was for the loss of 14 armored vehicles, if I remember correctly. So that's my remembrance here. But overall, that whole situation was another high-cost, low-reward thing that Russia pulled off. About the Russians are reporting about the situation around the Dnipro River, and they are still maintaining. So the Ukrainians are still maintaining a foothold. The Russians are still trying to get in there. They're mainly facing Ukrainian drone attacks, and of course they're maintaining their bridgeheads. That's from the Russian perspective. The situation in Krinky involves heavy fighting, as has been reported multiple times. The Ukrainians still have the upper hand, controlling most of the settlement. Though it does say that I think I saw somewhere else that the Russians had managed to kind of get a little bit more of a toehold back in there as well. So that area is very hot. And again, Krinky right here. The settlement itself is mostly destroyed, which we can probably see what's going on there. There's not much to see at this point. It's just basically destroyed buildings, and just like everywhere else that the Russians have put in their time and assaulted, just making an unholy mess out of it. And this is just a report about the Ukrainians getting near the Kozachi Lahery again. That means Cossack camps. And that's the situation on the front lines. I got a couple of little extra items, but I'll take a quick pause for any questions that might pop up at this point. Don't think that anybody's actively watching, but I think somebody's probably got me on sitting and listening while they're doing other things, which I appreciate. Thank you very much. All right, let's go ahead and go on into the extras. I pulled this up not for the reported losses, although 304,100 estimated of casualties on the Russian side, but for this quote: "If you fight, you won't always win, but if you don't fight, you will always lose." Thought that was a good quote. Little detour over to Israel for just a moment. Hezbollah has said that if Israel does not stop the operation in Gaza, they will attack Israel. Israel has said if Hezbollah attacks, Israel will attack Iran. That is a serious bluff right there, in the sense of trying to tell Iran that, seriously, if your proxies do this, it won't be your proxies paying the full price. It'll be you directly. Neat little story here. A couple of plastic surgeons came over from the United States to Kyiv to help out wounded Ukrainian defenders. And this is a lot of their story about helping these men recover from the wounds they received in war. Comment from Gabrielis Landsbergis: "For Russia, peace agreement only means time to rearm. We are dangerously close to missing the opportunity to end centuries of the Kremlin's imperial aggression and secure the future of multiple continents. Our children will curse us in the trenches we are digging for them." I mentioned this earlier, but I thought it bore a repeat. Say hello to Baby Devil. The Baby Devil is now owned by let me see, I don't think the name is here somewhere. Tyorda, that's it. Tyorda was a medic who has come over to volunteer and help out Ukrainians during the war. And with one of the military units that she got attached with had adopted this dog. And so she took the dog and she adopted it herself. That dog is enormous, fits in the pack, but the head's much bigger than the girl's. Just a really cool story of basically kindness to the pets in Ukraine. And I'll end with this video of this bird who's wondering why in the world this worm won't just jump into its mouth like when mama does it. I just thought it was really cute to watch it going back and forth, trying to say, look, my mouth is wide open. Jump on in there. I'm ready to eat. And that's everything for today. Thank you for joining me. I'm glad that you made it here. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and hit me with a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to see more of my Ukraine updates at this point. When they resume with over on the channel that I work with, these will of course necessarily stop at that point. But until then, I just want everybody to know that the Ukraine war is important, and it is important to stay informed. Therefore, that's why I continue to do these quick live updates, get the information I can, and then provide it for you, because this is where we don't want to forget this one. Thank you very much for joining me. Have a great day. We'll see you on the next video.